This video is brought to you by Alienware, featuring Intel Core i7 processors. Start gaming.
7 weapons that you want added to Battlefield 1. Now, before Christmas, in another video, I asked you guys to leave your suggestions for weapons that you think should make it into the game, and I said I'd make a follow-up, listing some of those. Well, that's happening right now. There were well over 2,000 comments left for me to trawl through, so I hope I've managed to pick the most popular suggestions, but again, you should leave more weapons down below in the comments today, and we can get that discussion started. Just very quickly before I continue, this video is sponsored by Alienware. They sent me that Aurora PC I showed off a little while back, and all the footage today was captured on that PC via Nvidia Shadowplay. Battlefield 1 runs as smooth as butter on this thing, but if you want to find out more about the Aurora PC or check out some of its specs, go down into the description, click the link, and that'll take you to the Alienware website. Suggestion number 1 from you guys in the comments section, or one that I picked out, was the M1917 Enfield rifle. Not to be confused with the actual Lee Enfield rifle, but it does follow a very similar path. Known as the American Enfield, but goes by the real name, United States Rifle Cal 30, model of 1917. I know, extremely catchy. You can see why it goes by the name American Enfield. Was an American rifle modified from the Lee Enfield P14. Now, although many people think of the 1903 Springfield as the main American rifle of the First World War, more 1917s were actually issued to American Expeditionary Force soldiers who went over to Europe to fight on the Western Front. The Springfield remained the official standard issue rifle of the US forces, but unofficially, most soldiers were given a 1917 to use. Some 75% of US soldiers by the end of the war were issued with a 1917. And that really was due to production difficulties of the 1903 Springfield, and the Americans decided to simply adapt the Lee Enfield design for use with American bullets. Now, in Battlefield 1, you could argue that adding a weapon that's based on the Lee Enfield is going to make the weapon too much like the current Lee Enfield that's in the game, but you have to remember the American Enfield is using American bullets, the same ones that are in the 1903 Springfield. So maybe you could adapt the rifle in terms of its sweet spot mechanic, its bullet velocity, to make it an intermediate weapon in between the SMLE and the 1903 Springfield. That's a way you could balance it. I think it would be a nice addition considering it was the most common rifle used by US forces on the Western Front. Weapon number 2, and this is another one of those experimental prototype weapons, the British Farquhar Hill automatic rifle. Initially designed and tested in 1908, it was one of the first automatic rifles ever produced in the world. Now, being a British design, it chambered the .303 round, the same as the Lee Enfield, taking advantage of that massive supply of rounds on the front lines, and these were fed into the rifle either by a 20 or 65 round drum magazine. Various tests with the rifle were conducted throughout the war, and many success stories came from the skies from aerial spotters. Having these self-loading rifles in the hands of a plane passenger was far more productive than a bolt-action rifle. But as we can see from Battlefield 1 already, plenty of machine guns started to make their way into planes, and self-loading rifles really weren't needed up there. In 1918, after several rounds of testing, the British War Office submitted an order for roughly 100,000 Farquhar Hill rifles. But before any were produced, the war in Europe ended with the Central Powers surrendering. Toby Wood, who suggested this rifle in the comments, stated it would fit well into the current medic class lineup, with most of those rifles featuring a self-loading style. Weapon number 3, and this one makes total sense, the Italian Carcano rifle. Currently in Battlefield 1, the Italian army is one of those factions without its standard issue rifle included. Putting the Carcano into the game would solve that problem. Now personally, considering the nationalities currently represented in the game, and with at least 2 more to come, in the form of the French army and the Russian Empire, I think it's quite important that each faction is given its own standard issue rifle. And whilst we're on that subject, the Ottomans should have their own too. That was the 1903 Ottoman Mauser, and it was made by the Germans. But very quickly, back to the Carcano. It was officially called the Modello 1891. The rifle was developed in the late 1800s. It entered service into the Italian army in 1891, and it replaced the older Vitali rifles. During the First World War, both a full rifle and a carbine variant were used, and the rifle went on to serve the Italians in the Second World War as well, with limited use within the German ranks. Weapon number 4, the Mosin Nagant from the Russian Empire. Now, I reckon it'll come as no surprise to anyone when DICE adds this with the Russian Empire DLC at some point in 2017. It's just too iconic a weapon not to be in the game. Introduced into the Russian army in 1891, the rifle is one of the most produced bolt-action rifles in history, with over 37 million being made throughout its lifespan. It's gone through several iterations and adaptations, but the M1891 Dragoon and infantry variants were the most widely used at the start of the First World War due to their simplicity. Russia's then still emerging mechanical industry couldn't keep up with the amount of rifles that were needed for the frontline troops, so they ordered over 1 million units to be made by Remington and the New England Westinghouse Company in the United States. By the time the Russians withdrew from the war in 1917, around 750,000 of the rifles had been produced and deployed. But the new Russian leadership under Vladimir Lenin refused to pay the American companies for their work. The American companies never took any payment before they started, and I think they assumed that the Russians were going to pay up at some point. Weapon number 5 in the list, and this is rather an odd one, but I do think it could add a bit of variety to the already healthy pool of pistols in the game. This is the Webley Mark 6 with its bayonet attachment. This could be like a semi-melee, semi-handgun option, something a little bit different. The bayonet attachment does have a little bit of weight on it, and that would soften the vertical recoil of the weapon, and then having the option to bayonet charge an opponent at close range, like in the neck or the chest or something, I think that would add a little bit of cool variety. But having said that, actually, just remembering this now, I find the bayonet charging in Battlefield 1 extremely infuriating because there's literally nothing you can do to counter it unless you bayonet charge back at somebody. But not all the time do you have a bayonet on your weapon. So perhaps instead, it could just be your melee option. Like if you choose this weapon with the bayonet, when you go to knife somebody, you simply stick your pistol out in front of you and try and sort of stab them like the combat knife does. I don't know, that could be pretty cool, but it was a very popular choice down in the comments, so I thought I'd mention it. Weapon number 6, another experimental one here, but this one actually caught my eye more than the one we spoke about earlier. This is the 0818 Maxim SMG. Very much like the Hellriegel made by the Austro-Hungarians, this creation never saw any use during combat, but it does show the ingenuity of designers at the time. Now you can see the striking body shape of the Maxim machine gun there, but it's been shrunk down to make it easier to handle, and apparently it used the readily available 9mm Parabellum rounds as well. Those are the rounds that the MP18 SMG ended up using. Beyond these pictures though, this weapon is a complete mystery. No one knows if it ever worked, no one knows who even made it, and it could simply be a prototype weapon during a design stage of somebody trying to create something else. With weapons like the Hellriegel and the Che Rigotti already in Battlefield 1, ones that never really saw any combat, I think the Maxim SMG could be a nice fit into that realm. And weapon number 7 here, well, this actually is a group of weapons, Obrez rifles. These are cut-down versions of larger bolt actions that fitted the need of having something powerful to take down a target, but needed to be easy to handle or carry or even conceal. Cut-down Mosin Nagants were said to have been used during the First World War, and here is an image of a Lee Enfield rifle cut down by British troops and handed to the tunnellers as defensive weapons when they went underground on the Western Front. Pretty interesting and could make for some really awesome close-quarter weapons. You could even make them sidearms with similar power to the Howder pistol. 7 weapons, all of them unique in their own way, and weapons I'm pretty sure would add a lot more variety to the gunplay in Battlefield 1. Imagine those cut-down SMLEs and Mosin Nagants in the tunnels under the trenches at Fort Vaux. That could be a really, really cool experience. Let me know what you think of all these weapons down below in the comments, and maybe leave some of your suggestions as well. I could always follow up this video again with another one highlighting even more. Thank you very much for watching. Drop me a like if you enjoyed the video. But until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.